So we wanted to make a very shortened video this morning. It won't be anywhere near as long as we were here last week, but it's a short video on where we're going to be going over the course of the next couple of weeks, and that is through the book, the glorious book of First John, in the way in the back of the New Testament. And so I want to take some time this morning and just explain where we're going, why we're going there, and what we're hoping to accomplish by going there. Okay, so that's how we're going to spend our time this morning. So let me address the first thing I said about why. Why First John? Why do we feel like that's the book that is apt to go through and preach through and teach through and study through at this particular point in time? So as you know, with the outbreak, with the pandemic, we're in a unique time, and in crazy times and in unique times, people are going to do and say a lot of things that have varying degrees of truth to them. So you have people going Bible prophecy crazy. You got people going end times crazy, antichrist, dark cabals, evil agendas, apocalyptic scenarios, and all the like. And so that can be overwhelming. That can be confusing and unhelpful in certain cases even. And we wanted to kind of go the opposite direction and focus on a book that if we don't get the stuff in First John right, it won't matter what chapter of Revelation we're in. It won't matter who's running the world, because we won't make it into God's kingdom, because we will not be regenerate people. And so we wanted to focus on the basics, the core, if you will, of our faith when we have kind of the world on pause and we can do some sharpening. And so we wanted to draw your attention to this glorious book of First John, which really is a manual for how to live the Christian life. It made me think, though, we did spend, as some of you know, we spent 6 years in Texas and specifically in San Antonio, and it made me think of a famous San Antonio Spurs basketball player, Tim Duncan, who many of you know. And if you do know anything about Tim Duncan, you know his famous nickname given to him by Shaq, the Big Fundamentals, right? Tim Duncan was the Big Fundamentals. His greatness, Tim Duncan's that is, was found in the fact that he mastered the little things, the basics of basketball. He was never the fastest, never the tallest, never the best shooter, never the most athletic, never the leading man in any of those categories. And yet he managed to put together a career, stats, achievements, championships, longevity, maybe the most important of all, that outshined many people who were far more gifted than he was, because he took the time to master the fundamental principles, the fundamental elements of the game of basketball. And so we are trying to use First John to draw your attention to the greatness and the wisdom in doing the very same thing spiritually that Tim Duncan, the great San Antonio Spurs basketball player, did athletically. And so that's kind of why we're wanting to go down this route with this book. And so we're going to begin preaching through it. Not a chapter a week, much shorter, some verses, 2, 3, 4 verses at a time. And we want you to get very knowledgeable. We want to deepen the knowledge that you have about what the Christian faith is ultimately and fundamentally and primarily about, and then what to do with that and how that should come out in your life, really amongst your family members who we're all quarantined with during this time together. So it's a time of pause. We get to learn some stuff, and then we'll get to do some stuff to the people that we really are most responsible for and to already, biblically speaking. So to the second thing, let me just talk very generally about the book of First John in general. Okay, this is considered a general epistle. There's no particular audience that's in view when John is writing to the church. Okay, and so we obviously are a part of that. The overall theme that we find in First John is just simply a recall, kind of a coming back to the fundamentals of our faith, back to the basics of Christianity, which we could all use. Nobody has the basics mastered, and we all could benefit from being called back to just the simplistic, basic principles of Christianity, of our faith. What are the things that First John as a book is going to teach us? It's going to teach us that a proper belief in Jesus produces obedience to commands. Believing right leads to doing. 2, obedience comes out in love for our fellow believers. Okay? Some of you already right now, are some of the verses from 1 John are coming into your mind as I'm speaking. Third, when these three, sound faith, obedience, and love, operate together, they result in happiness, holiness, and assurance, which we need all three right now. And they constitute together the evidence of a true Christian. Bottom line, those who claim to be Christians must absolutely display the characteristics of a Christian. And if you, 1 John is saying, if you do not display these characteristics, you were never born again in the first place. So it's a very challenging book. It's going to smack us around a little bit. It's going to give us maybe some bumps and bruises, but I think they're good bumps and bruises and ones that will make us ultimately stronger and better Christians coming out of quarantine, going back into the world that's going to need the love of God. So it's a very, 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 very strong book. So to close out this morning's video, short video, like I said, I just want to read a couple of verses from each chapter just to give you a taste of what are some of the things we're going to see as we move through this book. For example, 1 John 1:9. Many of you have memorized this verse. Very used verse, very popular verse. If we confess our sins, so writes John, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Talking about confession and then trusting in the advocate we have in Jesus before the Father. 1 John 2:15, very strong command. Do not love the world or the things of the world. We mentioned this verse a couple of weeks ago in our preaching time. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So again, very polarizing language. If you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. It's a very challenging verse. 1 John 2:28, and now little children abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink back from him in shame at his coming. And that's really what we were talking about. Instead of blowing up and going all through some kind of Bible prophecy in terms of apocalyptic stuff, let's just get it so that we're abiding in him, so that whenever he comes, under whatever circumstance he's going to come, we can have confidence. We can have assurance. That's what we're working towards this morning, beloved. 1 John 3:16-18. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? What a question. Little children, let us not love in word and talk, but in deed and in truth. So we say we love God, we learn about the love of God, then we have to do things. That's what 1 John is saying towards the brethren. 1 John 4:1, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world, and we'll deal with that whole thing in chapter 4 of the book. And last but not least, 1 John 5:4, for everyone who has been born of God, prayerfully that's you, overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. So I think this is going to be a tremendous time, only 5 chapters in the book, but they are absolutely loaded. And we can't wait to preach through them and teach through them with you and for you and serve you in that way. So God bless you. Next week we'll go all the way back to the beginning, 1 John chapter 1, and deal with the first couple of verses. I'm excited to do it. I'll see you then. Until then, take care and God bless.